Today we're going to look at an eye with some diabetic retinopathy. Looking at this globe at low power, you can see that here there is an odd shape in the sclera. This is an artifact that's been caused by processing. When this globe was removed, it would have been intact. Again, looking at low power, we can see that anteriorly, this isn't a transpupillary section. We don't have a gap here between the two iris leaflets. We can notice that the angles are open and that there is some corrugations on the front surface of the iris. So perhaps there is no neovascularization. At low power, the cornea looks normal. The lens is slightly globular, but otherwise okay. As we scan around to the back of the eye, we start to notice that the retina is separated, and there might be some fluid here in a subretinal area. Just here it appears to be tacked down to the choroid, so maybe there has been some lasering. The optic nerve looks pretty okay. I do wonder what's happening here and whether or not there's an epiretinal membrane. And then coming around here, we can see that again, there's a pretty convincing subretinal exudate here with lots and lots of pink proteinaceous fluid. If we look at the cornea, we can see that anteriorly, the epithelium is absent, but Bowman's membrane looks normal. If this was a postmortem eye, for example, we would expect that the surface epithelium might separate. The corneal stroma shows mild loss of clefting, but is basically okay without scarring. Descemet's membrane looks normal, and there is a good number of endothelial cells. Looking here at the inferior angle, we can see that the angle is open. There are a few probable macrophages hanging around in the angle. The trabecular meshwork looks good, as does the canal of Schlemm. We can see here the scleral spur coming forward. The anterior surface of the iris is corrugated, suggesting that there is no neovascularization. The ciliary body and processes here look pretty hyalinized. This is an age-related change, but also the basement membrane is thick, which is a diabetic-related change. Over here, we have some incidental episcleritis. Here in this close-up view of the angle, we can see that the trabecular meshwork contains a small amount of pigment. This is often found incidentally, but is increased in conditions such as primary open-angle glaucoma. These may be macrophages. There's only a couple of them. I can't see many on the anterior surface of the iris. So I don't think that it is melanoma, lytic, or any other pigment dispersion type glaucoma that's going on and affecting the trabecular meshwork. There's just not enough pigment. The canal of Schlemm looks good, and we can confirm that there's no new vessels on the anterior surface of the iris. Looking at the iris centrally, we can see that the iris pigment epithelium is lifted off a bit. Again, this is a change that's probably happened after death or after the eye's been removed. What we can also see is that the iris pigment epithelium is quite lacy looking due to glycogen accumulation. We can see the normal thick-walled iris vessels here. The iris is looking slightly flat through here, but I can't see any new vessels on it. The lens is looking pretty normal. Moving over to the other angle, we can see similar features. The angle is open. The front of the iris is corrugated. The iris pigment epithelium is vacuolated. Here we have the ciliary processes, which are hyalinized with a thick basement membrane. The trabecular meshwork and the canal of Schlemm appear normal. We're going to move posteriorly now to just here, where the retina appears to be tacked down. Looking at the retina at high power here, you can see that just here there's a laser burn. We have proliferation of the retinal pigment epithelium and gliosis, which has replaced the outer nuclear layer, which has been damaged in the laser burn. there is another one here. This vessel overlying is pretty normal looking. A bit further towards the optic nerve, we come to this area. In the choroid, there is this really nicely hyalinized vessel. You can see the really thick wall here, and this is typical of diabetes. In the overlying retina, there's a couple of areas here where again there is gliosis in the outer nuclear layer. And maybe this was a burn area. There is slight prominence of the retinal pigment epithelium here and here. Another thing that can give gliosis in the retina in diabetes is focal infarction. Now we're looking at the optic nerve. We can see that we have a good view of the normal optic nerve vessels. At the front here, there's a little area of early neovascularization. Let's have a closer look at that bit. Just reaching across the front here, we can see some red cells and a very, very delicate vessel starting to form. This is very early neovascularization. Notice here on Bruch's membrane, it is looking really hyalinized. This is also an effect of diabetes. Moving further superiorly, we come to an area where there is a subretinal exudate through here. In addition, there is separation of the membrane, the limiting membrane of the nerve fiber layer here, with some rugation of the retinal face here. Down here, which we'll look at, it becomes really quite separated and torn off. In addition, here we can see a very hyalinized little arteriole in the choroid. Please note there's numerous ganglion cells, so this eye is unlikely to have marked glaucoma. There's also some variation in the thickness of the outer nuclear layer here, which again could be due to infarction or could be due to perhaps some lasering, though that would be very unlikely here in the macula. Looking at higher power, we can see this area here where the nerve fiber layer limiting membrane has become torn off and is now all folded. Ganglion cell layer is present, inner nuclear layer, outer nuclear layer. So here we can see that the outer nuclear layer has lost some cells and there is this subretinal exudate. The photoreceptor layer is really degenerate, indicating that this is a true separation. We've got some hemosiderin-laden cells here, probably macrophages, in the subretinal exudate. Here in the choroid, you can see a really, really thick-walled hyalinized vessel. Moving more superiorly again, we come to an area of retina that has got some exudates here. They are in the outer plexiform layer, and these are dense eosinophilic deposits. If we had a PAS stain, they would be PAS positive. So these are what appear clinically to be hard exudates, and they're in a very typical area. Also on this slide, we have this, again, large subretinal exudate and degeneration of the photoreceptor layer. In this shot, the choroid is looking pretty normal. In summary, we have an eye that's showing diabetic retinopathy, mainly pre-proliferative with just a little focus of early proliferation. The key features are the exudates in the outer plexiform layer, the large subretinal exudate, the burns, which are characterized by gliosis and proliferation of the retinal pigment epithelium, and the hyalinization of the vessels.